in some markets. I think you've seen a lot coming out of Morocco into the rest of North Africa. You've seen out of South Africa coming up into SADC. We hope we're building a regional champion out of Botswana, both to the north and to the south. And you've seen a number of East African companies become regional champions. That's a huge investment thesis for the next 10 years. We hope it'll be expedited by reducing tariff, non-tariff barriers, and the success, knock on wood, of the Canal Free Trade Area.
Yes, I think this is a very, very relevant point. When you talk to private investors, in order to minimize the perceived risk versus the real risk, one of the most important concepts is diversification. So unless you have the diversification, you will not have an investor. It's very difficult nowadays to have a single country fund. It's extremely difficult. So these zones of commerce and trade are becoming extremely relevant for private equity. Unless you have a regional champion, it's going to be very difficult for you to invest into that deal, into that portfolio company, unless you have a huge capacity of international expansion within that economic area. And that concept of diversification is one that helps us to diminish the country risk and the individual country risk. Of course, and then of course the currency risk as well, absolutely.
Yeah, I would add to that when you build a regional champion, typically I think that actually increases your chances of a good exit, because if you look at the so if you look at the stats, most of the exits have been in the hands of trade sales actually, and a lot of that is from foreign buyers into Africa, and therefore they want private equity to go and do the legwork for them, and it's important to have these regional blocks in order to grow across borders, to build a regional business, and that facilitates the exit. That's the first point. And the second point is to build a regional business takes a different set of skills. It's not a question of lots of private equities can buy into a business, grow it locally, and so on. But especially in Africa, you've got different jurisdictions, regulations, structural tax barriers, etc., etc. It takes a completely different set of skills, and in particular, you classically prefer to have control of business that you're having in order to grow a business overseas, because very often interests are not aligned between what the PE wants to do, PE firm wants to do, and what the original owner wants to do.
All right, Jeremy?
I just wanted to add that, irrespective of the growing integration, regional integration of economies, I think if there's really one thing that private equity funds are good at, is actually taking their companies, their portfolio companies beyond borders. Simply for a reason is that private equity funds have access to a huge network that is extremely valuable for their portfolio companies. Most of the African private equity funds are funded by DFIs or, as you mentioned, Albert, regional or international pension funds. So they have access to this network from their LPs. Most of them have also multiple offices on the ground on the continent. Some may operate from Joburg, have an office in Nairobi, in Abidjan, and Casablanca. Extremely valuable just for the benefit of their portfolio companies. And last, some of the other funds, larger funds, have also a leg on other continents. I mean, such Investec, for example, you have a leg in the UK, you have presence, either in France, in the US, etc. And that is all for the benefit of their portfolio companies. And let me just take one example, for example, if I may. One of our private equity funds in our portfolio wasn't in Africa actually, but it could have been, was specializing in the agri-value chain. So they were basically financing seeds companies, food processing, primary agriculture. And so what they did is, so this fund, the manager was a global fund manager. So they had presence in the US, in Europe, and in emerging economies. And what they did, for example, for 5 full days, for a full week, basically, they took 4 of their CEOs to a trip to Europe to just visit other companies active in the same space, just to understand. Obviously, the idea was to find new commercial outlets, new customers for their portfolio companies. But it was huge value for the CEOs of these companies, so they could just observe how the same business was being done in other geographies. And for that, I think private equity is just an excellent model.
Yes, Alain. Oui, je voulais juste dire, comme la présentation de Stefano l'a montré tout à l'heure, vraiment le taux de pénétration des private equity sur le continent est encore très bas et ne peut que progresser. ce que vous disiez tout à l'heure, Anna, avec l'accord qui a été signé à Kigali la semaine dernière, qui crée une zone de libre-échange entre 44 pays africains, devrait être un élément très important qui devrait aider vraiment à accompagner l'ambition d'un certain nombre d'entreprises africaines. Vraiment, sur l'Afrique, nous savons qu'on a des besoins de formation, d'amélioration de la qualité des ressources humaines, mais il y a vraiment de plus en plus d'Africains entrepreneurs qui ont réellement envie d'entreprendre et qui ont besoin de ressources financières. Que ces ressources viennent des private equity ou des DFI, nous en avons besoin. Je dis simplement, il faut que la vision soit claire et partagée. Et sur cette ambition de ces compagnies-là, nous devons vraiment essayer de faire confiance au promoteur. Le promoteur est sur le terrain, il a une perception du risque qui est la sienne et que le partenaire financier doit essayer de comprendre, évidemment, de partager et si cela lui convient d'accompagner. Et vraiment, parce que la perception du risque, comme vous le dites, c'est vraiment important. Il y a souvent un gap entre la perception par le promoteur et celle du partenaire financier. Pour prendre un exemple qu'on le bien, aujourd'hui, nous avons un projet de créer une compagnie en DRC. Mais je suis persuadé que si j'avais un private equity dans mon actionnariat, il ferait tout pour essayer, pour des raisons que je comprends, parce que est-ce qu'à 2, 3 ans, 4 ans, vous pensez que ce sera rentable? Et j'aurais compris, mais les DFI que nous avons, ils ont partagé cette vision et ils m'accompagnent. Donc c'est pour dire que vraiment le partage de la vision est important, que ce soit dans l'assurance ou dans les autres secteurs, nous aurons toujours besoin de ces partenaires financiers dont les apports sont très importants. Ils renforcent la bonne gouvernance, ils améliorent l'information financière que nous produisons, ils nous accompagnent également dans le domaine de la formation qui est un challenge pour nous, mais dont nous pensons que ces échanges-là devraient nous permettre, ça je voulais finir sur la conclusion qui a été dit tout à l'heure par Stéphano en disant, même si c'est marginal, même si le risque est présent, mais le potentiel est tellement important que nous espérons continuer à profiter de la présence de ces excellents partenaires.
All right then, we're fast approaching our closing time here. So, gentlemen, I'd like you to give your closing thoughts in a minute or less, based on what we've discussed here. Yes, there's a need for private equity funds, but once we leave here, we start looking at the deal flow, we start looking at the businesses. What should we do next? Ronnie, let's start with you.